The cold evening wind cut through Daniel's thin jacket as he stood on the corner of Fifth Avenue, right outside Romano's Italian restaurant. His fingers were stiff from the cold, making it harder to play his violin properly. At just 19 years old, he was living a life he never imagined for himself. Daniel had always loved music. His grandmother had given him this violin when he was only 8 years old. She told him it was special, that it had been in their family for generations. Back then, life was different. He had a home, a warm bed, and dreams of becoming a professional musician someday. But life has a way of changing things when you least expect it. 3 years ago, his grandmother passed away. She was the only family he had left. His parents had died in a car accident when he was just a baby, so his grandmother raised him alone. After she was gone, Daniel tried to make it work. He finished high school while working part-time jobs, but it was never enough. The rent kept going up, and his small paychecks couldn't keep up. Eventually, he lost the apartment. At first, he stayed with friends, moving from couch to couch. But people can only help for so long before they have their own problems to deal with. 6 months ago, he ended up at the City Hope Shelter on Martin Street. It wasn't a bad place, really. The staff were kind, and they gave him a bed and hot meals. But recently, more and more people were showing up, and there weren't enough beds for everyone. Just last week, Daniel had to sleep outside for 3 nights because the shelter was completely full. Those were the scariest nights of his life. The temperature dropped below freezing, and he huddled in a doorway with his violin case clutched to his chest, praying nobody would steal it. That violin was all he had left of his grandmother, and it was also his only way to earn money. During the day, he attended classes at Riverside Community College. He had managed to get financial aid and was studying music theory, hoping that education might open some doors for him. But balancing school with survival was exhausting. Some mornings he went to class without having eaten breakfast. Other times he was so tired from walking around all night looking for a safe place to sleep that he could barely keep his eyes open during lectures. His classmates had no idea about his situation. He always made sure to look presentable, washing his clothes at the laundromat once a week with the few dollars he could spare. He used the college bathrooms to clean up and shave. Nobody knew that after class, instead of going home like everyone else, he would find a busy street corner and play his violin for spare change. Street performing was unpredictable. On a good day, if he found the right spot and played for several hours, he might make $20 or $30. That was enough for food and maybe a cheap meal. On bad days, he barely made $5. People would walk past without even looking at him. Some days it felt like he was invisible. Today had been one of those bad days. He had played for 3 hours in the afternoon and made only $7. Now, as the evening crowd passed by, he was trying again. His fingers moved across the strings, playing a soft melody he had composed himself. It was a sad song, one that came from his heart. The music spoke of loss, of loneliness, of hoping for better days. A few people stopped to listen for a moment before walking away. One woman smiled and dropped $2 into his open violin case. Daniel nodded his thanks, his fingers never stopping the music. Every dollar mattered. Every single coin brought him closer to eating dinner tonight. As he played, he looked at the well-dressed people walking in and out of Romano's restaurant. Through the large windows, he could see families sitting together, laughing and enjoying their meals. The warm light from inside made everything look cozy and comfortable. Daniel tried not to feel bitter. These people had worked for what they had, just like he was working now. But sometimes it was hard not to wonder why life was so easy for some and so difficult for others. His shoes were falling apart. He had put pieces of cardboard inside to cover the holes in the soles, but he could still feel the cold pavement through them. His jeans were worn thin at the knees, and his jacket had a broken zipper that he had tied shut with a piece of string. But his violin, that precious instrument, was in perfect condition. He took care of it better than he took care of himself. As the night grew darker and colder, Daniel knew he needed to make a decision soon. Should he keep playing and hope to make a few more dollars, or should he start the long walk back to the shelter and pray there would be a bed available tonight? The temperature was dropping fast, and he could see his breath in the air. Winter was coming, and that scared him more than anything. Last winter, he had still been staying with friends, moving from place to place but always having a roof over his head. This winter would be different. This winter, he might actually freeze to death on the streets if he couldn't figure something out. He thought about selling his violin. It was probably worth a few $100s, maybe even 1,000 if he found the right buyer. That money could get him a room somewhere for a month or two, give him time to find a better job, maybe change his situation. But every time he considered it, he felt sick to his stomach. This violin was his connection to his grandmother, to his family, to everything he had lost. It was also his talent, his gift, the one thing that made him feel like he was still somebody. Daniel closed his eyes as he played, letting the music flow through him. For these few moments, he wasn't a homeless kid begging for change. He was a musician and artist, someone with purpose and skill. The music made everything else fade away, if only temporarily. When he opened his eyes again, he noticed people streaming into the hotel next to the restaurant. There was some kind of fancy event happening, a charity gala or something like that. Women in expensive dresses and men in tuxedos walked past him without a glance. Their jewelry probably cost more than everything he had owned in his entire life. Daniel kept playing, hoping that maybe someone coming out of that event would feel generous. Rich people at charity events were supposed to care about helping others, right? Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe tonight someone would see him, really see him, and decide to help. He had no idea how right he was. He had no idea that his life was about to change in ways he could never imagine. All because he was about to do something desperate, something he never thought he would do. He was about to ask a question that would set everything in motion. But for now, he just played his violin in the cold night air. Another invisible person on another city street, trying to survive one more day. The music floated through the cold night air as Daniel poured his heart into each note. He had been playing for almost 2 hours now, and his fingers were getting numb. But he couldn't stop yet. He needed just a few more dollars to buy something to eat tonight. As he finished one of his favorite pieces, he heard the sound of footsteps stopping in front of him. Daniel looked up to see an older couple standing there watching him. The man was wearing an expensive-looking suit, and the woman had a fur coat draped over her shoulders. They both had kind faces, the type of people who looked like they had lived comfortable lives. "That was beautiful, young man," the woman said softly. Her voice was gentle, almost motherly. "You play wonderfully." "Thank you, ma'am," Daniel replied, managing a small smile despite his exhaustion. He had learned that being polite always helped. People were more likely to give money if you were respectful and grateful. The woman reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet. Daniel's heart lifted a little. She was actually going to give him something. She took out a $20 bill and carefully placed it in his violin case. $20! That was more than he had made all day. He could buy a real meal with that, maybe even save a little. "Thank you so much," Daniel said, and he meant it. "Thank you, really. This helps more than you know." The couple smiled at him, but there was something in their eyes that looked like pity. Daniel had seen that look before. It made him feel small, but he understood it. He knew how he must look to them. A teenager with worn-out clothes standing on a street corner with a violin. They probably wondered what had gone wrong in his life to bring him to this point. As the woman put her wallet away, something inside Daniel just snapped. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the fear of another night in the cold. Maybe it was just the desperation of knowing that winter was coming and he had nowhere to go. Whatever it was, it made him do something he never thought he would do. "Excuse me," he called out as the couple started to walk away. They turned back to look at him, surprised. "I know this is strange, and I'm sorry for asking, but..." He took a deep breath, trying to gather his courage. "Would you let me play at your home?" "I don't need money. I just need a warm place to stay." The words hung in the air between them. Daniel could see the shock on their faces. The woman's eyes went wide, and the man's friendly expression changed to something more guarded. He had made them uncomfortable, and he immediately regretted saying anything. "I'm sorry," Daniel said quickly. "I shouldn't have asked. I'm sorry. Thank you for the money, really." But the couple was already backing away. The man put his arm around the woman's shoulders protectively as if Daniel might be dangerous. They turned and walked away quickly, disappearing into the crowd of people heading toward the hotel. Daniel felt his face burning with embarrassment. What had he been thinking? You can't just ask strangers to let you into their homes. They probably thought he was crazy, or worse, that he was some kind of criminal trying to rob them. He had ruined what had been a nice moment, scared away people who had been kind to him. He was about to pack up his violin and leave when he noticed someone else standing nearby. A woman had been standing in the shadows at the edge of the building, and she had clearly heard everything. Daniel felt his stomach drop. Great. Now someone else had witnessed his humiliation. The woman stepped forward into the light from the street lamp. She looked to be in her 50s, maybe early 60s, with perfectly styled gray hair, and wearing a long black coat that probably cost more than Daniel would make in a year. Her face was stern, with sharp features and cold eyes that seemed to look right through him. She didn't look like the type of person who smiled very often. "You want to trade music for shelter?" she asked. Her voice was crisp and businesslike, with no warmth in it at all. Daniel didn't know what to say. He felt even more embarrassed now. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to—" "Answer the question," the woman interrupted. "Do you want to exchange your musical performances for a place to stay?" Daniel swallowed hard. This woman made him nervous, but something about the way she asked made it seem like she was actually considering it. "Yes," he said quietly. "Yes, I do." The woman studied him for a long moment. Her eyes moved from his face to his worn-out shoes, taking in every detail of his appearance. Daniel felt like he was being examined under a microscope. It wasn't a comfortable feeling, but he forced himself to stand still and meet her gaze. "What's your name?" she asked. "Daniel. Daniel Chen. How old are you, Daniel?" 19. "Where do you live?" Daniel hesitated. He didn't want to admit the truth, but something told him this woman would know if he lied. "Right now I stay at the City Hope Shelter. When there's space available, and when there isn't space, I find somewhere outside." The woman nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she had already suspected. "Can you play every single day?" "Yes, ma'am. I play every day anyway." "I have a property," the woman said, her tone matter-of-fact, like she was discussing a business deal. "A large house that's been empty for many years. It's fully furnished, but nobody lives there. If you're serious about this arrangement, I could let you stay there." Daniel felt his heart start to race. Was this really happening? Was this woman actually offering him a place to stay? It seemed too good to be true. "Are you serious?" he asked, hardly daring to believe it. "I don't joke about business matters," the woman replied coldly, "but there would be strict conditions." "Are you interested in hearing them?" "Yes, absolutely, yes." "You would stay at the house for 3 months," she began, counting off on her fingers. "Every evening you must play your violin in the main ballroom for exactly 2 hours. Not 1 hour and 59 minutes, not 2 hours and 1 minute. Exactly 2 hours. If you miss even one performance, you leave immediately. Do you understand?" "Yes, I understand." "You cannot bring any guests to the property. Not friends, not family, not anyone. You will be there alone." "That's fine. I don't really have anyone to invite anyway." The woman's expression softened slightly at that, but only for a moment. "You cannot ask questions about the house or why I'm making this arrangement. You simply do as I say. Play every evening, 2 hours for 3 months. In exchange, you have a place to live, heat, running water, and a kitchen with food provided." Daniel couldn't believe what he was hearing. Food? Heat? A real roof over his head? It sounded like a dream. But there was something strange about the whole situation. Why would this wealthy woman offer such a thing to a homeless teenager? What did she get out of it? Why? He asked before he could stop himself. "Why would you do this?" The woman's face hardened again. "I just told you not to ask questions. That's condition number 4. If you need me to spell it out. No questions about my motivations or the property's history. You accept the arrangement as it is, or you don't. What's your answer?" Daniel thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. 3 months in a real house versus 3 months on the streets during winter. It wasn't even a choice. Even if this was some kind of weird situation, even if there was something strange about it, he would be an idiot to say no. "I accept," he said firmly. "When can I start?" The woman reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a business card and a set of keys. "Tomorrow morning. The address is on this card. Be there at 9 a.m. sharp. I'll meet you there to show you around and explain the remaining rules." Daniel took the card and keys with trembling hands. The card was thick and expensive feeling, with elegant lettering that read, Victoria Hartman, Hartman Properties. There was an address printed below the name. "Thank you," Daniel said, and his voice cracked with emotion. "Thank you so much, Mrs. Hartman. You have no idea what this means to me." "It's Ms. Hartman," the woman corrected. "And don't thank me yet. You haven't spent a night in that house. We'll see if you can actually fulfill your end of the bargain." With that mysterious statement, Victoria Hartman turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. Daniel watched her go, still holding the keys and card in his hands, wondering what he had just gotten himself into. But as he packed up his violin and started the walk back to the shelter for what he hoped would be the last time, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in months. He felt hope. Daniel barely slept that night. He lay in his bed at the shelter, staring at the ceiling, the keys to the mysterious house clutched in his hand. Part of him worried that he had dreamed the whole thing, that when morning came, he would wake up and realize it had all been too good to be true. But when the first light of dawn came through the shelter windows, the keys were still there, solid and real in his palm. Victoria Hartman's business card was tucked safely in his pocket. It was really happening. At 7 in the morning, Daniel gathered his few belongings. Everything he owned fit into one backpack in his violin case. Some clothes, a toothbrush, a photo of his grandmother, and a few textbooks from his college classes. That was it. His whole life packed into 2 bags. "You leaving us, Danny?" asked Joe, one of the shelter workers who had always been kind to him. "Yeah," Daniel said with a smile. "I found a place to stay." "That's great, kid. Really great. You take care of yourself, okay? And hey, if things don't work out, you always have a bed here when there's room." Daniel thanked him and walked out into the crisp morning air. He had 2 hours before he needed to be at the house, so he stopped at a small cafe and used some of the $20 from last night to buy coffee and a breakfast sandwich. It was the first real breakfast he had eaten in weeks, and it tasted incredible. At exactly 8:30, he caught the bus that would take him across town to the address on the card. As the bus moved through the city, Daniel watched the neighborhoods change. They went from the downtown area with its shops and businesses, through the middle-class residential areas, and finally into a part of town he had never visited before. This was where the truly wealthy people lived. The houses got bigger and bigger, set back from the road behind tall gates and long driveways. Massive trees lined the streets, and everything looked perfectly maintained. Daniel felt very out of place in his worn clothes and old backpack. He got off at the stop closest to the address and walked the last few blocks. When he finally found the right house, he stopped and stared in disbelief. To call it a house didn't seem right. It was a mansion, a genuine Victorian-era mansion that looked like something out of a movie, 3 stories tall, with a tower on one corner and elaborate woodwork along the roof and windows. The property was surrounded by a black iron fence that must have been at least 8 feet high. Daniel checked the address on the card 3 times to make sure he had the right place. This couldn't be real. Nobody was just going to let him, a homeless teenager, stay in a place like this. But there, standing at the front gate, was Victoria Hartman. She looked just as stern and businesslike in the morning light as she had the night before. She was looking at her watch impatiently. "You're early," she said as Daniel approached. "Good, I appreciate punctuality. This is the place?" Daniel asked, unable to hide his amazement. "I told you not to ask questions," Victoria said sharply, but then she seemed to soften just slightly. "Yes, this is the place. Come on, I'll show you around." She opened the gate with a key and led him up a long driveway lined with overgrown hedges. The garden had clearly been beautiful once, but now it looked neglected and wild. Dead leaves covered the pathway, and weeds grew up between the cracks in the stones. The front door was enormous, made of dark wood with stained glass panels on either side. Victoria unlocked it and pushed it open. The hinges creaked loudly like they hadn't been used in years. Daniel followed her inside and found himself in the largest entrance hall he had ever seen. A grand staircase curved up to the 2nd floor, and crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling high above. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust, and white sheets draped over most of the furniture. "The house has been empty for almost 30 years, Victoria explained as she led him through the rooms. "But everything still works. The electricity, the water, the heating. I've had maintenance people keep it functional." They walked through room after room. A formal dining room with a table that could seat 20 people. A library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A kitchen that was surprisingly modern compared to the rest of the house. Multiple bedrooms, each one bigger than the entire sheltered dorm room Daniel had been sharing with 30 other people. But the most impressive room was the ballroom. Victoria led him through a set of double doors, and Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The room was enormous, with a high ceiling painted with faded murals of clouds and angels. Tall windows lined one wall, though the curtains were drawn shut, making the room dim and shadowy. At one end of the room was a stage, and on that stage sat a grand piano covered in dust. "This is where you'll play every evening," Victoria said, her voice echoing slightly in the empty space. "From 7 to 9 o'clock. Exactly 2 hours. Can I play anywhere in the room?" Daniel asked. You can play on the stage or down on the main floor, whichever you prefer, but you must be in this room and you must play for the full 2 hours. Daniel set down his violin case and walked slowly around the ballroom. His footsteps echoed on the wooden floor. The room felt strange, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something. The bedroom you'll use is on the 2nd floor, 3rd door on the right, Victoria continued. The kitchen is stocked with basic groceries. There's a list on the refrigerator of what's available. Every Monday morning, a delivery will bring fresh food. You'll never see the delivery person, they'll leave it on the back porch. I don't understand, Daniel said, forgetting for a moment that he wasn't supposed to ask questions. Why are you doing this? This house must be worth millions. Why would you let a stranger stay here? Victoria's face went hard. What did I tell you about questions? I'm sorry, I have my reasons, Victoria interrupted. Reasons that are none of your concern. You have a simple job, Daniel. Play your violin in this room for 2 hours every evening. That's all you need to worry about. Can you do that, or have I made a mistake? No mistake, Daniel said quickly. I can do it. I will do it. Good. Victoria walked toward the doors, then paused and turned back to face him. There are a few more rules I need to make clear. Daniel waited, nervous about what else she might say. First, do not go into the tower room. The door is locked and it will stay locked. Don't try to open it. Second, if you see or hear anything unusual in this house, ignore it. Old houses make strange noises. Shadows play tricks. Pay it no mind. Third, and this is very important, you are not to leave the property during your 3-month stay except for absolute emergencies or your college classes. Food will be provided. Everything you need is here. Understood? Wait, I can't leave at all? What if I need something? What would you need that isn't provided? Victoria asked coldly. Daniel thought about it. He had nowhere else to go anyway. No friends to visit, no family. His only regular activities were classes and street performing, and he wouldn't need to perform anymore. I guess nothing, he admitted. Then we have an agreement. Victoria pulled out a piece of paper from her coat pocket and handed it to him. This is a simple contract outlining everything we've discussed. Read it and sign it. Daniel took the paper and read through it carefully. It was exactly as she had said. He would stay for 3 months, play for 2 hours every evening, couldn't have guests, couldn't ask questions about the property. In exchange, he had free room and board. At the end, there was a strange clause that caught his attention. What does this part mean? He asked, pointing to the bottom. The part about fulfillment of the arrangement may result in additional opportunities. It means exactly what it says, Victoria replied. If you successfully complete the 3 months, we'll discuss what happens next. But don't worry about that now. Just focus on getting through each day. Daniel found a pen in his backpack and signed his name at the bottom of the contract. Victoria took it back, folded it neatly, and put it in her pocket. I'll be checking in periodically, she said. Not every day, but randomly. If I arrive at 7 p.m. and you're not playing in this ballroom, you're out. If I find that you've had guests, you're out. If you break any rule, even a small one, the arrangement ends immediately. Are we clear? Crystal clear. One more thing, Victoria said, and for the first time Daniel saw something in her eyes that looked almost like sadness. When you play, play from your heart. Don't just go through the motions. Really play. That's the most important thing. Before Daniel could respond, she walked out of the ballroom. He heard her footsteps echo through the entrance hall, then the sound of the front door closing. A moment later, he heard her car start up and drive away, and then silence. Daniel stood alone in the massive ballroom in a mansion that felt like it belonged to another world entirely. He looked around at the dusty grandeur, the faded paintings, the covered furniture. He thought about the strange rules, the locked tower, Victoria's mysterious reasons for this arrangement. Any normal person would probably have second thoughts. Any normal person might wonder if this was safe, if something weird was going on. But Daniel wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about the fact that tonight, for the first time in months, he would sleep in a real bed in a warm house, without wondering if someone might rob him or if he'd freeze in his sleep. He picked up his violin case and his backpack and headed upstairs to find his bedroom. Daniel found the bedroom exactly where Victoria had said it would be. 3rd door on the right, 2nd floor. When he opened the door, he was amazed all over again. The room was bigger than any apartment he had ever lived in. A massive 4-poster bed sat in the center, covered with a thick comforter that looked like it cost more than a month's rent. Heavy velvet curtains hung over tall windows. There was an antique dresser, a writing desk, and even a small sitting area with 2 chairs. He set his backpack down and just stood there for a moment, taking it all in. Was this really his room now? It seemed impossible. The bathroom connected to the bedroom was just as impressive. Clean white tiles, a clawfoot bathtub, and a shower with water pressure that actually worked. Daniel took the longest, hottest shower of his life, watching months of street grime wash down the drain. He had almost forgotten what it felt like to be truly clean. After his shower, he explored the rest of the house more thoroughly. In the daylight streaming through the windows, it was easier to see the details. The mansion was beautiful, but it had an atmosphere of abandonment. Dust covered everything, and some of the rooms smelled musty from being closed up for so long. He found the kitchen and checked the refrigerator, half expecting it to be empty despite what Victoria had said. But it was fully stocked. Fresh vegetables, milk, eggs, bread, cheese, and even some frozen meals. The pantry had pasta, rice, canned goods, and snacks. It was more food than he had seen in one place in months. Daniel made himself a sandwich, and it was the best sandwich he had ever tasted. Not because the ingredients were anything special, but because he was eating it in his own kitchen, in a house where he was allowed to be. No one was going to tell him to hurry up and leave. No one was going to make him feel like he was taking up space meant for someone else. After lunch, he went to his college classes. It felt strange to leave the mansion and go back into the normal world. At school, he was just another student, and nobody knew that he was now living in a mysterious mansion under a bizarre arrangement. He got back to the house around 5 in the afternoon. The sun was starting to set, and the mansion looked different in the fading light. More imposing somehow, more like something out of a Gothic novel. Daniel had a couple of hours before he needed to start playing, so he went to the library and looked at the books. Most of them were old leather-bound volumes about history, philosophy, and art. But there were also some newer books mixed in, and a lot of them were about music. Biographies of famous composers, books about music theory, collections of classical sheet music. At exactly 7 o'clock, Daniel took his violin and went to the ballroom. He had decided to play from the stage, at least for the first night. It felt right somehow, like he was giving a real performance rather than just practicing. As he rosined his bow and tuned the strings, he noticed how quiet the house was. Not just quiet, but silent. No sounds of traffic from outside. No humming of appliances. No footsteps or voices. Just complete and total silence. He began to play, starting with some pieces he knew well. Bach, Mozart, some folk songs his grandmother had taught him. The music echoed beautifully in the large room. The acoustics were incredible, much better than playing on a street corner where the sound just disappeared into the air. But as he played, something started to feel off. It was nothing he could name exactly, just a feeling. Like he wasn't alone. Like someone was watching him. Daniel tried to ignore it. Victoria had warned him that old houses make strange noises and play tricks on your mind. He was probably just jumpy because everything was so new and unusual. He kept playing, focusing on the music, then he heard it. A soft creaking sound, like footsteps on old wood, but it wasn't coming from the hallway or the stairs. It was coming from inside the ballroom, somewhere in the shadows beyond where the light reached. His bow faltered and the music stopped. Daniel stood perfectly still, listening. The house was silent again. Nothing moved. He was being paranoid, that was all. Old houses settle, floors creak, it didn't mean anything. He started playing again, but now he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. His eyes kept darting to the dark corners of the room, to the shadows behind the covered furniture. Was something moving back there? Or was it just his imagination? As the minutes ticked by, the feeling got stronger. Daniel found himself playing faster, rushing through pieces he usually took his time with. He just wanted to get to 9 o'clock to fulfill his 2 hours so he could leave this room. At 8:30, something happened that made his blood run cold. He was in the middle of a particularly emotional piece when he heard a sound that definitely wasn't the house settling. It was a sigh, soft and sad, coming from somewhere near the back of the room. Daniel stopped playing completely. "Hello?" he called out. His voice sounded small in the huge space. "Is someone there?" No answer. Just that heavy, oppressive silence. He wanted to run. Every instinct told him to grab his violin and get out of this room, out of this house. But he thought about Victoria's warning. If he didn't complete his 2 hours, he was out. back on the streets. Back to the shelter if there was room. Back to freezing nights and wondering where his next meal would come from. He couldn't afford to break the rules, not even on the first day. Daniel took a deep breath and started playing again. He tried to tell himself that he had imagined the sigh. The house was playing tricks on him, just like Victoria said it would. He just needed to get used to it. He made it to 9 o'clock. 2 full hours of playing, though the last 30 minutes felt like the longest of his life. As soon as his watch showed 9, he packed up his violin quickly and left the ballroom, closing the doors firmly behind him. Back in his bedroom, with the lights on and the door locked, Daniel felt a bit better. He was being silly. There was nothing wrong with the house except that it was old and creepy. By tomorrow, he would be used to it, but as he lay in bed that night trying to fall asleep, he heard sounds. Footsteps in the hallway that stopped outside his door, whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The distant sound of music, though he wasn't playing and couldn't imagine where it was coming from. Daniel pulled the covers over his head like a little kid afraid of monsters. He told himself over and over that it was just the house settling, just the wind, just his imagination. But deep down he knew something was strange about this place. He thought about Victoria's rules. Don't go in the tower. Ignore anything unusual. Don't ask questions. She had known. She had known that weird things would happen here, and she had warned him ahead of time not to worry about it. But what kind of house was this? And why did Victoria really want someone to play music here every night? Daniel didn't sleep well that first night. He kept waking up thinking he heard voices or footsteps, and once, around 3 in the morning, he could swear he heard the sound of someone crying, a woman's voice full of such deep sadness that it made his own eyes water. When morning finally came, he was exhausted, but he had made it through the first night. He had completed his first performance. Only 89 days to go. As he got ready for classes that morning, Daniel looked at himself in the bathroom mirror. He looked tired, but he also looked better than he had in months. Clean, well-fed, rested even if he hadn't slept well. Whatever was going on in this house, whatever strange presence or weird sounds existed here, it was still better than being on the streets. He could handle creepy. He had survived worse. But as the days went by, Daniel was going to discover that the house held secrets much bigger than strange sounds in the night, and those secrets would change everything he thought he knew about why he was really here. For now, though, he just focused on getting through each day, each performance, each night in the mysterious mansion. He told himself it would get easier, that he would get used to it. He had no idea how wrong he was. 2 weeks passed, and Daniel settled into a routine. Wake up, have breakfast in the large kitchen, go to his college classes, come home in the afternoon to practice and do homework, then play in the ballroom from 7 to 9 every evening. After that, he would eat dinner, read in the library, and try to get some sleep. The house was still creepy at night, but he was getting used to it. Or at least he was getting better at ignoring the sounds. The creaks and whispers were just part of living in an old building. That's what he kept telling himself anyway. His playing was improving too. With all this time to practice and the amazing acoustics of the ballroom, Daniel found himself getting better every day. He was learning new pieces, perfecting old ones, and even starting to compose some of his own music. Life was good, or at least as good as it could be given the circumstances. He had food, warmth, safety. His grades at college were improving now that he wasn't exhausted and hungry all the time. For the first time in months, Daniel felt like maybe things were going to be okay. But the strange feelings in the ballroom weren't going away. If anything, they were getting stronger. It was during his 3rd week in the house that things started to get really weird. Daniel was playing a particularly emotional piece, one of his own compositions about loss and loneliness. His eyes were closed as he drew the bow across the strings, lost in the music. When he opened his eyes, he saw something that made him freeze mid-note. There was someone sitting in the front row of chairs, or at least there appeared to be someone. It was hard to tell exactly what he was looking at. The figure was translucent, like looking through foggy glass. A woman in an old-fashioned dress, the kind you might see in pictures from the 1950s or 60s. Her hands were folded in her lap, and her head was tilted slightly like she was listening intently. Daniel's bow clattered to the floor. He stood there, paralyzed with fear, staring at the impossible thing in front of him. The figure didn't move. Didn't speak, just sat there, barely visible in the dim light of the ballroom. Daniel blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, looked away, and then looked back. The figure was still there. This wasn't his imagination. This wasn't shadows playing tricks. There was something, someone, in the room with him. He wanted to run, wanted to scream, but he was frozen in place. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. After what felt like forever but was probably only a few seconds, the figure began to fade. It got lighter and lighter, like morning fog burning off in the sun, until finally it was gone completely. Daniel was alone in the ballroom again. He stood there shaking for a long time. His watch said it was only 7:45. He was supposed to play until 9. But how could he keep playing after what he had just seen? Then he remembered Victoria's words. If you see or hear anything unusual, ignore it. Old houses make strange noises, shadows play tricks. She had known. Victoria had known something like this might happen, and she had warned him to ignore it. Don't ask questions, just play the music. Daniel picked up his bow with trembling hands. He had to finish his 2 hours. If he stopped now, he would lose everything. Back to the streets, back to the shelter, back to nothing. He started playing again, though his hands were shaking so badly the notes came out wrong at first. But he kept going, forcing himself to focus on the music and nothing else. He didn't look at the chairs. He didn't look at the shadows. He just played. He made it to 9 o'clock, then practically ran out of the ballroom. That night he barely slept at all. The next evening, Daniel almost didn't go to the ballroom at 7. He stood outside the double doors, his violin in hand, trying to work up the courage to go inside. What if the figure appeared again? What if it was clearer this time? What if it tried to communicate with him? But he thought about the alternative. 3 months, Victoria had said. He just had to make it 3 months, and then maybe she would help him get on his feet properly. 3 months of security, of food and warmth and safety. He couldn't give that up because he was scared. Daniel opened the doors and went inside. At first, nothing unusual happened. He played his evening repertoire, keeping his eyes focused on his music stand, trying not to look at the chairs where the figure had appeared before. But around 8 o'clock, he felt it again. That presence, that feeling of being watched by someone he couldn't see. This time when he looked up, the figure was clearer. The woman in the old-fashioned dress was sitting in the same spot, but he could see more details now. She had dark hair pulled back in a neat style. Her dress had small buttons down the front. Her face was young, maybe in her 20s, but there was something infinitely sad in her expression, and she was crying. Silent tears ran down her translucent cheeks as she listened to his music. Daniel's first instinct was still to run, but something stopped him. The figure didn't seem threatening. She wasn't moving toward him or trying to speak. She was just sitting there listening, crying. He thought about the music he was playing. It was a piece about loss, about missing someone who was gone. Maybe somehow the music was reaching her. Maybe that's why she was crying. Without really thinking about it, Daniel kept playing. He played through the fear, played through the confusion, played through the sheer impossibility of what he was seeing. And as he played, the woman in the chair seemed to relax slightly. The tears kept falling, but there was something almost peaceful about her expression now. When he finished the piece, the figure slowly faded away again. Like before. Daniel stood there, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. This became the new pattern. Every evening when Daniel played in the ballroom, the figure would appear. Sometimes she was clear and detailed. Sometimes she was barely visible, just a suggestion of a person in the shadows. But she was always there, always listening. Daniel started to think of her as his audience. He knew it was crazy. He knew he was probably losing his mind. But there was something almost comforting about it. He wasn't playing for an empty room anymore. Someone was listening, even if that someone was a ghost, because that's what she had to be, right? A ghost. Daniel had never believed in such things before, but what else could explain what he was seeing? He started choosing his pieces more carefully, playing songs he thought she might like. Sad songs mostly, emotional pieces about love and loss. And every time he played these songs, she would appear, tears running down her translucent face. One night, about a month into his stay, something new happened. Daniel was playing a particularly moving piece, and the figure appeared as usual. But this time, when he looked at her, she raised one hand slowly as if reaching toward the music. Her lips moved, like she was trying to say something. Daniel stopped playing, watching her intently. "Can you hear me?" he asked softly. The figure's hand dropped and she faded away immediately. "Wait," Daniel called out. "I'm sorry, please come back." But she was gone and she didn't reappear that night. Daniel felt terrible. He had broken whatever spell or connection existed between them. He had spoken when maybe he should have just kept playing. But the next evening she came back. This time Daniel didn't speak. He just played, pouring all his emotion into the music, trying to communicate through the only language they seemed to share. And the woman listened, cried, and sometimes smiled softly at particularly beautiful passages. Daniel began to wonder about her. Who was she? Why was she here? What did she want? But he remembered Victoria's rule about not asking questions. Besides, who would he ask? The ghost herself? Victoria, who had specifically told him to ignore anything unusual. Strange things started happening outside the ballroom too. Fresh flowers would appear on the grand piano in the ballroom, even though Daniel never put them there and no one else had access to the house. Objects would move slightly from where he had left them. Sometimes late at night he would hear the faint sound of violin music coming from somewhere in the house, though he wasn't playing and his violin was in his room. The house felt alive now, in a way it hadn't during those first few days. Not scary exactly, though it was still unsettling. More like the house was waking up after a long sleep, responding to the music Daniel played every evening. He stopped being quite so scared. The figure, his ghostly audience member, never tried to hurt him. She just listened, cried, and slowly, so slowly, seemed to become more peaceful. Daniel started to feel a strange sense of purpose. Maybe this was why Victoria had brought him here, not just to play music in an empty house, but to play for someone who desperately needed to hear it, someone who had been alone for a very long time. He still didn't understand why or how, but he was beginning to accept that this house, this situation, was much more than it appeared to be. And somewhere in this mystery was a story of tragedy and sorrow that his music might somehow help heal. If only he knew the full truth. If only he understood what Victoria's real purpose was. But those answers would come later. For now, Daniel just played, night after night, for his audience of one ghostly woman who cried at the music and seemed to be slowly finding peace. Daniel knew he wasn't supposed to ask questions. Victoria had been very clear about that. But after 6 weeks of playing for a ghost every night, after seeing the same sad woman crying at his music over and over, he couldn't take it anymore. He needed to know who she was and why she was trapped in this house. It was a Sunday afternoon and he didn't have classes. Daniel sat in the library looking at the rows and rows of books, wondering if any of them held the answers he was looking for. Then his eyes fell on something he hadn't noticed before. A photo album, sitting on a shelf between two heavy books about architecture. He pulled it out carefully and opened it. Inside were old photographs, black and white images from decades ago. Photos of the house in its prime, when the gardens were beautiful and everything looked new. Photos of parties and gatherings with people in formal clothes drinking from champagne glasses. And then he saw her, the woman from the ballroom. She looked exactly the same, down to the dress and the hairstyle. In the photos, she was solid and real, standing in the very ballroom where Daniel played every night. She was smiling in some pictures, but even in those, there was a sadness in her eyes. Written beneath one photo in faded ink were the words Lily, Spring 1975. Lily. The ghost had a name. Daniel looked through more albums, finding more pictures of Lily. Sometimes she was alone with a violin standing on the stage of the ballroom. Sometimes she was with an older woman who looked stern and cold. The older woman appeared in many photos, always looking important and in charge. With a jolt, Daniel recognized that face. The bone structure, the way she held herself. It was Victoria. Much younger. Probably in her 30s or 40s in these photos, but definitely Victoria. So Lily had lived here when Victoria was younger. They had known each other. But what was their relationship? Sisters, friends? And what had happened to Lily? Daniel knew he should stop looking. He was breaking the rules, investigating things Victoria had told him not to ask about. But he couldn't help himself. He needed to understand. He spent the rest of the afternoon searching the library for more clues. He found old newspaper clippings tucked between pages of books. Society page articles about the Hartman family, one of the wealthiest families in the city. Articles about their charitable donations, their business success, their position in high society. And then he found it. A newspaper article from November 1975. yellowed with age and brittle to the touch. The headline read, "Tragedy Strikes Prominent Family. Young Violinist Dies at 24. Daniel's hands shook as he read the article. It described how Lily Hartman, a talented violinist and the younger sister of Victoria Hartman, had died in the family mansion. The article called it a tragic accident, but was vague about the details. It mentioned that Lily had been a promising musician who had studied at prestigious schools and was expected to have a brilliant career. A sister. Lily was Victoria's younger sister, and she had died in this house, but the article didn't tell the whole story. Daniel could sense that. It was too carefully worded, too polite and vague. People didn't just die in accidents at 24 without more details being reported. Something else had happened, something the newspaper either didn't know or wasn't allowed to print. Daniel put the newspaper clipping in his pocket and continued searching. In the back of a dusty book about music history, he found a letter. It wasn't addressed to anyone and it wasn't signed, but the handwriting was delicate and feminine. It looked like it had been written in a hurry with some words crossed out and rewritten. The letter said, "I can't do this anymore. They won't let me be who I am. They won't let me love who I want to love. Mother says I have to give up music, that it's not appropriate for someone in our position. She's arranged a marriage to someone I don't even know, someone who will elevate our family connections. But I'd rather die than give up everything that makes life worth living. Maybe that's the only choice left. I'm so tired of fighting. I'm so tired of pretending to be someone I'm not. The music is all I have, and if I can't have that, what's the point?" Daniel read the letter 3 times, each time feeling worse. This wasn't just a tragic accident. Lily had been desperate, trapped by her family's expectations and society's rules. She had been forced to choose between her passion and her duty, between love and obligation, and she had chosen death. Daniel thought about Victoria's cold demeanor, her strange insistence on the rules, her mysterious reasons for wanting someone to play music in the ballroom every night. She was trying to reach her sister, trying to bring peace to a spirit that had been trapped here for almost 50 years, unable to move on because of how unhappy she had been in life. That's why Victoria had brought him here. That's why she wanted the music played every single night. She was hoping that somehow, through the music, her sister might find the peace she never had when she was alive. Daniel felt tears running down his own face as he sat there in the library, surrounded by the evidence of this family's tragedy. He thought about his own grandmother, how devastated he had been when she died. How much worse must it be for Victoria, knowing that her sister had been so miserable, feeling so alone and trapped that she saw no other way out. And Victoria had lived with that guilt for 50 years. That's why she had locked up the house, why she never came back here, why she seemed so cold and hard on the outside. She was carrying an unbearable weight of grief and regret. Daniel looked at the clock. It was 6:30. In 30 minutes, he needed to be in the ballroom for his nightly performance. But now everything was different. He wasn't just playing music for a ghost anymore. He was playing for Lily, a real person who had suffered and died far too young. He was playing for Victoria, who was trying desperately to make amends for not saving her sister. When 7 o'clock came, Daniel went to the ballroom with a new sense of purpose. He sat on the stage and took out his violin, but before he started playing, he spoke to the empty room. "Lily," he said softly, "I know who you are now. I know what happened to you, and I'm so sorry. I'm sorry you felt so trapped. I'm sorry no one helped you. I'm sorry you lost your music and your love and your hope." The room was silent. Nothing moved. But Daniel could feel that presence, that watching feeling stronger than ever before. "I'm going to play for you," he continued. "Not because Victoria told me to, but because you deserve to have music in this house again. You deserve to know that your story matters, that you mattered." He raised his violin to his chin and began to play. Not sad songs this time. Not music about loss and loneliness. Instead, he played pieces full of life and joy and freedom. Music that soared and danced and celebrated being alive. As he played, Lily appeared. But this time she looked different. She wasn't crying. She was listening with an expression of wonder on her face, like she was remembering what it felt like to be happy, to be free. Daniel played for the full 2 hours, pouring everything he had into the performance. He played as if he could change the past, as if his music could reach back through time and tell that desperate young woman that things could have been different. that her life had value beyond what her family demanded of her. When he finished, Lily stood up from her chair. For the first time since Daniel had been seeing her, she smiled. A real, genuine smile. Then she raised her hand to her lips and blew him a kiss before fading away. Daniel sat there in the ballroom long after his 2 hours were up, thinking about everything he had learned. He understood now why Victoria had been so insistent about the rules. She was trying to protect him from getting too emotionally involved, from getting hurt by the truth, but it was too late for that. Daniel was involved now. He knew Lily's story, and he was going to do everything in his power to help her find peace. He also knew that he had broken Victoria's rules by investigating the house's history. She would probably be angry when she found out, but he didn't care anymore. This was bigger than the rules, bigger than their arrangement. This was about helping a lost soul finally find rest after 50 years of being trapped in sadness and regret. And if Daniel had any say in the matter, he was going to make sure that happened no matter what it took. Tomorrow he would call Victoria and tell her everything. Tell her that he knew, that he understood, and that he wanted to help. She could throw him out if she wanted, but at least he would have tried. For tonight, though, he just sat in the ballroom where Lily had died, feeling her presence around him, hoping that somehow his music was making a difference, hoping that love and compassion, even 50 years too late, could still heal old wounds. The next morning, Daniel called Victoria using the number on her business card. His hands were shaking as he dialed. She had told him not to ask questions, and he had broken that rule completely. She might end the arrangement right then and there. But he had to tell her what he knew. Victoria answered on the third ring. "Daniel, is something wrong? Have you broken one of the rules?" "I need to talk to you," Daniel said. "About Lily." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Victoria finally spoke, her voice was tight with anger. "I specifically told you not to ask questions about this house." "I know. I'm sorry. But I see her, Ms. Hartman. Every night when I play, I see your sister. And I found the photos, the newspaper article, the letter. I know what happened." Another long silence. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, Victoria said, "I'll be there in an hour." She hung up before Daniel could say anything else. Daniel spent the next hour pacing nervously around the house. He had probably just ruined everything. Victoria would be furious that he had investigated despite her clear instructions. She would throw him out and he would lose this safe place he had found. But he kept thinking about Lily's smile last night. The first genuine happiness he had seen on her face. Whatever happened with Victoria, helping Lily had been worth it. Victoria arrived exactly 1 hour later. Daniel heard her car in the driveway and went to meet her at the front door. When she walked in, she looked older than he remembered. Tired, like she hadn't slept well in a very long time. They sat in the formal living room, facing each other in uncomfortable silence. Victoria stared at him with those cold eyes, but Daniel thought he could see pain beneath the ice. "Tell me what you know," she said finally. Daniel told her everything, about seeing Lily in the ballroom, about finding the photos and the newspaper article, about the letter that revealed how trapped and desperate Lily had felt. Victoria's expression didn't change as he spoke, but her hands clenched tightly in her lap. When he finished, Victoria stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the overgrown garden. She was quiet for so long that Daniel wondered if she was going to speak at all. Finally, she said, "You're right, about all of it. Lily was my younger sister and she died in this house 50 years ago. She killed herself. The newspaper called it an accident because our family had influence. And mental health and self-harm weren't things people discussed publicly back then, but everyone who mattered knew the truth." Her voice was flat, emotionless, but Daniel could hear the grief underneath. "She was so talented," Victoria continued. "The violin was her whole life. She could have been one of the greats if our mother had let her pursue it professionally. But Mother had other plans. She wanted Lily to marry Thomas Wellington, the son of a wealthy business partner. It would have been good for the family's position in society. But Lily didn't want to marry him," Daniel said softly. "No. She was in love with someone else, a musician she had met at school, someone completely unsuitable in our mother's eyes. He had no money, no connections, no proper family name. Mother forbade Lily from seeing him. She even threatened to have him arrested on false charges if Lily didn't break things off." Victoria turned from the window and Daniel was shocked to see tears running down her face. He had never imagined this cold, stern woman could cry. "I should have helped her," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "I was older, I had some freedom that Lily didn't have. I could have stood up to Mother, could have helped Lily run away, could have done something. But I was a coward. I cared too much about what people thought, about maintaining our family's reputation. I told Lily to be reasonable, to accept that she couldn't always get what she wanted." She wiped her tears away roughly, angry at herself for showing emotion. The night she died, she played her violin in the ballroom one last time. She had composed a piece of music, something beautiful and heartbreaking. I was upstairs in my room and I could hear the music. I knew something was wrong. The music sounded like goodbye. But I didn't go to her. I told myself I was being dramatic, that Lily was just upset and would calm down by morning. Victoria's voice dropped to almost a whisper. By morning she was gone. I found her in the ballroom, her violin beside her. The piece of music she had composed was on the music stand. I've kept it all these years, but I've never been able to listen to anyone play it. It's too painful. Daniel felt tears in his own eyes now. "I'm so sorry, Miss Hartman. After she died, I couldn't stay in this house. I couldn't even look at it without feeling guilty. I locked it up and tried to forget. But I couldn't forget. And over the years I became convinced that Lily was still here, trapped somehow. So I brought musicians to the house, hoping someone could reach her through music, the only language she truly understood. But none of them could see her," Daniel guessed. "No. Some of them felt uncomfortable and left early. Others completed their time but reported nothing unusual. You're the first person who's actually seen her, who's connected with her spirit." Victoria sat back down, looking directly at Daniel. "Why you? What makes you different?" Daniel thought about it. "Maybe because I understand what it's like to feel trapped. When I was living on the streets, I felt like I had no options, no future. I was desperate and alone, just like Lily was. Maybe she can sense that we share something." Victoria nodded slowly. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you simply have a kind heart, and she responds to that." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "I want to show you something." Inside the folder was sheet music, yellowed with age but still readable. The title at the top said, "Freedom Song," and was signed L. Hartman. "This is the piece Lily composed," Victoria explained. "The one she played the night she died. I've kept it safe all these years, but I've never had the courage to hear it played. I think it's time." She handed the sheet music to Daniel. His hands trembled as he held it. This was Lily's final creation, her last message to the world. "You want me to play this?" he asked. "I think you have to," Victoria said. "I think it's the key to helping Lily move on. She needs to know that her music wasn't lost, that someone heard it and understood what she was trying to say." Daniel looked at the notes on the page. The composition was complex and beautiful, full of emotion and technical skill. It would take practice to play it properly. "When?" he asked. "Tonight," Victoria said. "I'll be here. I need to hear it too. I need to finally say goodbye to my sister." They spent the afternoon together, and for the first time, Victoria opened up about her life. She told Daniel stories about Lily when they were young, about how creative and joyful she had been before their mother's expectations crushed her spirit. She talked about the guilt she had carried for 50 years, how it had shaped every decision she made. "I never married," Victoria said. "Never let myself be happy. It felt wrong to have joy when Lily had died so young and so sad. I threw myself into business, made more money than I could ever spend, but none of it mattered. I was just running from the pain." "She wouldn't want you to spend your whole life suffering," Daniel said gently. "I know, but knowing something intellectually and accepting it emotionally are two different things." As evening approached, Daniel practiced Lily's composition. It was as beautiful as he had expected, full of longing and hope and sorrow all mixed together. He could feel Lily in every note, could sense what she had been trying to express. At 7 o'clock, Daniel and Victoria went to the ballroom together. Victoria sat in the same chair where Lily's spirit usually appeared. She looked nervous and scared, but determined. Daniel took his position on the stage. He held his violin, Lily's sheet music on the stand in front of him. He took a deep breath and began to play. The music filled the ballroom, more powerful than anything Daniel had played before. Each note seemed to resonate with the walls themselves, as if the house had been waiting 50 years to hear this song again. As he played, Lily appeared. But this time she was more solid, more real than ever before. She stood in the center of the ballroom, and she was glowing with soft light. She looked younger somehow, happier, like she had looked in the old photos from before everything went wrong. Victoria gasped when she saw her sister. "Lily," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Lily turned and smiled at Victoria. It was a smile full of forgiveness and love. Then she began to dance, moving gracefully to the music Daniel was playing. As she danced, another figure appeared beside her. A young man, also glowing with that same soft light. He took Lily's hand and they danced together. Daniel understood. This was the man Lily had loved, the one she had been forbidden to be with. Somehow in death they had found each other again. Victoria was sobbing now, but they were tears of relief and joy as much as sadness. "I'm sorry," she said to her sister's spirit. "I'm so sorry I didn't help you. I'm sorry I let you feel so alone." Lily stopped dancing and walked toward Victoria. She reached out one translucent hand and touched her sister's cheek, a gesture of comfort and forgiveness. Then she spoke, and though her voice was barely audible, like wind chimes in a distant breeze, they both heard her clearly. "I was never angry at you," Lily said. "I was angry at myself for not being brave enough to fight for my own happiness. But I'm free now, and you need to be free too. Let go of the guilt. Let go of the pain. Live, Victoria. Live the life I couldn't." The next morning felt different. Daniel woke up in the mansion, but the house didn't feel creepy anymore. It felt peaceful, like it had finally exhaled after holding its breath for 50 years. The morning sun streamed through the windows in a way it hadn't before, like even the light could tell something had changed. Victoria called him around 10 o'clock. "Can you come downstairs? I'd like to talk to you about something important." Daniel found her in the formal living room, looking very different from the cold, stern woman he had first met. She looked softer somehow, younger even though that didn't make sense. She smiled when he walked in and it transformed her whole face. "Sit down," she said, and her tone was warm now, almost motherly. "We need to discuss your future." Daniel sat, feeling nervous but excited. Victoria's mention of opportunities last night had kept him awake, wondering what she meant. "Your 3 months aren't up yet," Victoria began. "But I think we can both agree that the arrangement has fulfilled its purpose. Lily is at peace, and that's what mattered most. You're free to stay here as long as you need, or I can help you find proper housing. Whatever you prefer." "That's very generous," Daniel said. "But you mentioned opportunities?" Victoria's smile widened. "Yes, you see, Daniel, over the past 50 years I've built a considerable fortune. I own properties all over the city, multiple businesses, investments. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. And until last night I had no idea what to do with it all. I've been just accumulating wealth with no real purpose." She leaned forward, her eyes bright with excitement that Daniel had never seen before. "Last night, watching Lily finally find peace because of music, because of your talent and compassion, I realized what I need to do. I want to create a foundation in Lily's name, a foundation that helps young artists like you, people with talent who are struggling because they don't have money or connections or support." Daniel felt his heart start to race. "A foundation?" "The Lily Hartman Foundation for Young Musicians," Victoria said. "It will provide housing, education, instruments, everything a talented young person needs to develop their skills without worrying about survival. No one should have to play violin on street corners just to eat, Daniel. No one should have to give up their dreams because they can't afford to pursue them." Daniel could barely breathe. "That's incredible. And I want you to be the first recipient," Victoria continued. "A full scholarship to the music school of your choice. Room and board covered, a stipend for living expenses, access to the best teachers and instruments. Everything you need to become the musician you were meant to be." Daniel felt tears welling up in his eyes. "Ms. Hartman, I don't know what to say. This is more than I ever dreamed of. You don't have to say anything. You've already given me something priceless. You gave me closure, peace, and a purpose again. This is the least I can do." Victoria pulled out some papers from her briefcase. "I've already spoken to my lawyers this morning. They're drawing up the paperwork for the foundation. But there's something else I want to discuss with you." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the overgrown garden. "This house. I've kept it locked up for 50 years because I couldn't bear to be here. But now, after last night, it doesn't haunt me anymore. It feels like Lily's home again, not her prison." Victoria turned back to Daniel. I want to convert this mansion into a music school, a place where young musicians without financial means can come to study, live, and practice. They'll have beautiful rooms, practice spaces, access to instruments, and teachers who actually care about developing talent rather than just collecting tuition fees. Daniel stood up, overwhelmed by what he was hearing. A whole school? Here, why not? This house has 30 rooms, most of them empty. The ballroom is perfect for performances and recitals. The library can be converted into classrooms. The gardens can be restored. This place was built for music and joy, and it's time it served that purpose again. And students would really be able to live here? Daniel asked, thinking about all the kids like him who were struggling. Absolutely, free of charge for those who need it. We'll have about 20 students living here at any given time, studying various instruments. They'll be chosen based purely on talent and need, not on their family connections or ability to pay. Victoria sat back down and looked at Daniel seriously. I want you to help me build this, Daniel. You understand what these kids are going through because you've lived it. Your input would be invaluable. And of course, you'll continue your own studies here while we get everything set up. Daniel couldn't stop the tears now. They flowed freely down his face. Just 2 months ago, he had been homeless, hungry, and hopeless. He had asked a desperate question to strangers on the street, never imagining it would lead to this. Yes, he said, his voice choked with emotion. Yes, I'll help you. I'd be honored. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Victoria hired contractors to renovate the mansion while preserving its historic beauty. The ballroom was restored to its former glory, with the grand piano tuned and polished until it gleamed. Practice rooms were built with proper soundproofing. The bedrooms were updated with comfortable furniture and modern amenities, while keeping their vintage charm. The garden was transformed by landscape artists who brought it back to life. Flowers bloomed where weeds had grown. Paths were cleared and repaired. Benches were placed in peaceful spots where students could sit and think or compose. Daniel threw himself into his own studies while helping Victoria plan the school. He auditioned for and was accepted into the prestigious Riverside Conservatory of Music, one of the best programs in the country. He had worried about being behind other students who came from wealthy families and had been training their whole lives. But his raw talent and the emotion he poured into his playing impressed everyone. His professors were amazed by his progress. You have something special, one of them told him. Technical skill can be taught, but you can't teach someone to play with the kind of heart and soul you have. That's a gift. Daniel knew where that gift came from. It came from struggle, from understanding pain and loss, from connecting with Lily's spirit and learning that music could heal even the deepest wounds. As word spread about the Lily Hartman Foundation, applications started pouring in. Young musicians from all over the country, kids from poor neighborhoods, foster care, homeless shelters, all of them with talent, but no opportunities. Victoria and Daniel personally reviewed each application, reading the stories, listening to the audition recordings. They chose the first group of 20 students carefully. A 15-year-old girl who played saxophone and had been sleeping in her car with her single mother. A 17-year-old boy who played piano and had taught himself using free videos online because his family couldn't afford lessons. A 16-year-old who played cello and had been bouncing between foster homes their entire life. Each one had a story of struggle and determination. The day the first students arrived at the mansion, Daniel stood at the entrance with Victoria, welcoming them. He saw the same look in their eyes that he must have had 2 months ago when he first walked through these doors. Disbelief, hope, fear that it might all be too good to be true. Welcome home, Daniel told each of them. This is a place where your talent matters more than your bank account, where you're judged on your passion and dedication, not on where you came from. You're going to do amazing things here. The mansion came alive with music. At any hour of the day you could hear someone practicing. Violin, piano, guitar, saxophone, flute, drums. The sounds would blend together into a beautiful chaos of creation and learning. The ballroom hosted weekly recitals where students performed for each other, building confidence and skills. Daniel became a mentor to many of the younger students. They looked up to him because he understood their struggles firsthand. When they felt discouraged or homesick or overwhelmed, he would tell them about playing violin on street corners, about being so cold his fingers wouldn't work properly, about the fear of not knowing where he would sleep each night. You're not just here to learn music, he would tell them. You're here to learn that your circumstances don't define your future. That talent and hard work can open doors that seemed permanently locked. Victoria was transformed by the project. She spent most of her time at the mansion now, overseeing operations, talking with students, attending performances. The cold, stern woman Daniel had first met was gone completely. In her place was someone warm and grandmotherly, someone who smiled easily and hugged the students when they needed encouragement. One evening, almost a year after Daniel had first moved into the mansion, he was in the ballroom practicing for an important performance. He was playing a piece he had composed himself, inspired by everything that had happened. He called it From Streets to Symphony. As he played, he felt that familiar presence. He opened his eyes and saw Lily standing at the back of the ballroom. But she looked different now. She wasn't sad or trapped. She was glowing with happiness, and she wasn't alone. The young man she loved stood beside her, and they were both smiling. Daniel didn't stop playing. He smiled back at them and continued the piece. When he finished, Lily applauded silently, then blew him a kiss like she had done once before.